The following is an 18PR production. From deep in the heart of West Texas.
And everybody knows Studio A or Ground Zero is at 18PR, and everyone knows 18PR is out yonder.
It's a one-of-a-kind, worldwide transmission. Heroes and Heroines File. The Free-Range Talent File. The Unexplained Files. The Ain't Love Grand File. Michael Shawn's Campfire.
And the Free-Range Texan News Network.
A clear and present detour on the road of everyday life.
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast.
With our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn.
Well, and here we come. Episode 21 of the Free Range Texan podcast. Welcome in, everybody. This one is once again going to be a little bit different. Allow me to explain. We have been struck by lightning. As we're putting together episode 21, we are not doing the usual monologue where I go, what a great show we got for you, and we're going to do this and this and this and this, because I'll tell you the truth, we're on a production deadline here. The only thing that seems to be working is Foxy the Wonder Dog, our security dog, is on duty. You may hear her in the background a little bit. We have had an interesting jolt happen at our studios, and a lot of the interviews and things that we had lined up and set up for today's podcast are simply not there in the computer files and so on and so forth that we were looking for. We noticed that a lot of our go-to things that were lined up on the log for today's show are not found. Now, clearly, they're not there. They must be somewhere else. I mean, that's true, right? That's how it works. Well, anyway, we've got a great show. We're just not sure what it's going to be. So this one is almost real time. Let me tell you, what we had planned to do is not do so much of the talking to people around the world or discussing things around the United States, but on episode 21, we're bringing things back home, right here to West Texas. Big thing going on this time of year in West Texas is the farmers and the ranchers. They're big all year round, but especially now because it's planting season. And if the rain is not just right, which it hasn't been, and if the weather temperatures are not warming up properly, which until the last 2 or 3 days they haven't really been, and if the farmers are able to get into the fields on time, which they by and large haven't been able to here on the South Plains, to get planted in time for the growing season, really kind of getting to be an interesting year. We've got another story coming up about cattle and the cattle business. Did you know you're involved in cattle business? Now, except for some of you vegans out there, this won't apply to, but if you eat steaks or even a cheeseburger, you are in fact in the cattle business. You're just at your end of the cattle business. Now, I've said all that to say this. We're going to talk about the cattle business a little bit this morning, and I think you'll find this one story kind of interesting. And we've got other good stuff coming up just as soon as we can find it here on episode 21 of the Free Range Texan podcast. Let's get ready to ride. have digital microphone will travel. Blankets, ho! Get 'em up! Move 'em out! You're listening to the Free Range Texan Podcast.
Thanks to Scott Geezy for pointing some things out. Let me ask you something. When I mention cowboys and cattle, what part of the country comes to mind? Texas? Maybe Kansas? That's cattle country for sure, and has been for well over 150 years. But did you know there's a state even further west that's been the home to cattle ranching and cowboys for even longer than that? I know what you're thinking. California. Nope. I guess we gotta ask ourselves, what's further west than California? It's not a trick question. Hawaii is further west, but what does Hawaii have to do with cowboys and cattle? Well, compadres, we're about to have an aha moment. Because old Michael is suggesting that a lot of folks miss the boat when it comes to Hawaii. Seriously, there are cowboys and cattle ranches in Hawaii. In fact, cowboys and cattle ranches have been a home there in the islands for over 150 years, long before the settlers gave a whole lot of thought about venturing west of the Mississippi. When you think of Hawaii, you think of grass skirts and palm trees, not cattle. That's the tourist version. But did you know that there have been longhorn cattle in Hawaii since 1793? They were a gift from England. The Hawaiian king was so impressed with the longhorns, they were allowed to roam and breed freely in the islands. The problem was, once all the longhorns were rounded up, the island people really didn't know what to do with them. They had no experience in the cattle ranching business. So in 1832, the king of Hawaii sent an ambassador to Mexico for some help in managing his new herd. The ambassador returned with 3 vaqueros, and these vaqueros were skilled, really skilled. The king requested more vaqueros to teach the Hawaiians. They taught them other crafts as well, like how to work leather and metal. The Hawaiians began to become very skilled at making saddles, lariats, bullwhips, as well as bits and spurs. So I guess, partner, here's old Michael Shawn's point. I just think we ought to mention our Hawaiian cowboy brothers. Truth is, they've never once received more than a passing mention in history books or stories like the ones we tell around our campfire. But the Mexican vaqueros and the Hawaiian cowboys started shipping out cattle to the mainland during the California Gold Rush. And through the generations, they played a vital part in the cattle industry in America. I just think it's important to set the record straight about cowboys way out west. We need to go there now and have a campfire on the beach.
It's the Travelin' Texas File. Also, I have a great story to tell you about. Happened to me just the other day. It's hanging around the studios there at 18PR, and that's where all the cool people hang out, you know. Anyway, I was listening to one conversation after another, and pretty soon there came a call over the intercom that there was a call for Michael Shawn, and I thought, well, who knew I was here? Anyway, I get a call, and it's an old friend of mine, John Sanders, who has a company that I'm not supposed to tell you about because it's a very private hush-hush deal. If I did tell you about it, I would call it Deep Creek sound production company. And if I did tell you where it was from, well, he too is also located his production company out yonder here in the West Texan area. Anyway, John called me, and gee whiz, this guy's been a friend of mine forever and ever. So you can see how a deal like this would happen. John is, among other things, producing a television show. He doesn't like for me to call it a television show because its primary focus is to run on YouTube. But trust me, kids, it's a television show. And he was going up to shoot a bunch of footage at Bob Wills Day at Turkey, Texas. Now, I want to tell you something. This is absolutely true. Bob Wills Day is a great event. And if you get a chance to go to Bob Wills Day, it's every year there in Turkey, Texas. And if you get a chance to go, you should go. The last time, just for one reason or another, I've been in Timbuktu or here and there doing this and that. I have not been free to go to Bob Wills Day in, 25, 30 years. The last time I went was when a dear old friend of mine by the name of Brian Hawkins called me, who turned out to be one of the leading photographers and videographers for the Bob Phillips program, the Texas Country Reporter. And Brian's had a great career, but way back when we were young kids, he called and said, hey, let's go there. I want to go shoot some video for Channel 28 in Lubbock, Texas. So we jumped in the car and we went over there. Point being that the reason why I got there even was because I was riding with a television guy shooting footage. So now, all these years later, what are the odds John Sanders is producing a program called West Texas Then and Now? Don't go look for it because the pilot's not out yet, but when it is, I'll tell you about it, even if it has to be secretly, all right? And I'll tell you where you can see it. Anyway, he said, hey, we're going over, we're going to shoot some television. I said, he said, would you like to go? And I said, sure, you got room? He said, no problem. I got in the truck there with John, and away we went for Turkey, Texas. We had a ball. It is delightful. But the time of day that we were there and this sort of thing made it hard to find some of the big-name Western performers to do an interview with before I left town. Instead, I began walking down the street and meeting some remarkable people. And I want to tell you about this place that I found and this great lady that I talked to there. And before we go any further, you're going to be able to go to our blog at freerangetexan.net and see pictures of this Bob Wills bus and this place, this old Phillips 66 service station. And in a moment in this interview, I'm going to give you the background on all of this stuff and how it all came to be. And interestingly enough, you don't have to be there on Bob Wills Day to go to Turkey, Texas and see all this. It's there year-round. Anyway, I've got an interview coming up with a lady by the name of Rhoda Coughlin, who I simply just walked up on. I had my digital recording device in my hand, and asked her name and didn't realize it, but I had picked out one of the most interesting people at the entire affair in the entire town of Turkey, Texas to get to talk to for our Free Range Texan podcast. And also, I would just like to point out that, folks, this is the real deal. This is Turkey, Texas, on the wide open Texas, West Texas, South Plains, where the breeze does blow quite often. We were standing out in the front of this place, and the wind was wreaking havoc with our microphones. It went something like this.
Come on, Mama. Let me take you all up there.
Excuse me, tell me your name again.
Rhoda Coughlin.
Rhoda, this place is called the Turkey Roost.
Well, this is, and this is, of course, the Phillips 66,
Yes.
which was in ruins in 2007 when we looked at it. And as we were heading back to Scottsdale, Arizona, I said, Buck, my husband, we've got to have somebody, we've got to save that station. And I've got photographs of, the before and after, and you see the after here.
What a romantic idea.
Well, especially when you live in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh my heavens, yes.
Many, many miles from here. So we happened to have one of the gas pumps, and we knew we needed two, so we restored them at home, and then kept bringing loads of things over here as we were doing long distance phone calls and saying,
From Scottsdale, Arizona.
right, okay, we do need a new roof, yes, and we need a whole lot of things, and so that's how it worked.
Now, you came up with Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys original bus. How did you come by that?
We wished it was Bob Wills' original bus. They don't know where it is, and they have said that probably it's in the field somewhere, and it would be $100,000. Well, we got online. My husband, Buck, was able to be on the bus that Bob Wills was driving with his cigar smoking, but Buck never did play with Bob Wills. But he says, Rhoda, we've got to make this a complete picture. So Buck got on Google, and he found the exact make, exact year, and the exact look. And so we had it shipped from Canada, and it came during a Bob Wills event, and we unloaded it, and here it is. And then in Scottsdale, we did the scroll, and we shipped it UPS to the guy that was painting this little old bus and adding the scroll script.
Oh, that is a picture. Oh, my.
This little building, we called it Motel 2, and we had a couple of little beds in there. And so we had family that kept coming and kept coming. We had our RV here. And so after Buck's stroke, we came, the last time we were here was 2012, and then we didn't come for 5 years. Last year we came back to meet the new owners, which we dealt only by phone, and they purchased it. Dr. Mike Goldsby from near Houston, Texas,
Yes.
purchased it. He said, Rhoda, we would have never bought it had you not made it look like it does now.
Oh.
And they're doing all the interior stuff, making it just special as can be. And so this building is now the Turkey Roost. And they said, okay, Buck and Rhoda, we put in a bathroom, and we have put in a queen-size bed, and you and Buck stay here as long as you can come from Arizona.
So people can travel to Turkey, Texas all year round and see most of what is here today
Yes.
here on display.
Yes, yes.
And I can't help but think that the two of you are responsible for making all that happen. You were the inspiration.
Well, the Turkey people absolutely say Buck and Rhoda are the king and queen and have saved this. And at one time we had collected fire trucks, and we were hoping to do a little fire district with our last fire truck in Arizona in the community we live.
saw a few of those in the parade, like what you're talking about.
Last year it was in the parade, but we gave that fire truck to the town of Turkey. Buck says, it's yours, but you got to come to Scottsdale and get it. They had no problem.
What a great mission.
Yeah, they towed it here, and it's been in the parades, and over the years, they said it's just been a treasure.
Well, I know the people from Turkey must be tremendously grateful for the interest that you've taken in their community.
No matter where we go, back, Rhoda,
Actually, she's the queen of Turkey, Texas. She actually is.
This is my son. He flew in from L.A.
All the way from L.A. It's so fun.
This last year.
Not only to see my mom, but the whole Turkey, Texas thing is great.
If
Bob
people
Wills days.
when
my shirt, you can't see his shirt on.
when they come to Texas and to West Texas and they want to visit Turkey, what you're telling me is most of this would be on display for them to come by and see.
Absolutely. And they say at the restaurant here, all day long, cars come in here and park and they drive right up into the village
And take a
station,
photo
take their own
opportunity.
photos, and it's standing in front of the gas pumps.
You're probably on blogs across America.
Oh, all you have to do is say Bob Wills Bus, and you will see a 1-hour show of unloading this.
Rhoda, bless you and thank you for your time. You've been listening to the Free Range Texan Podcast's Traveling Texas File. The Free Range Talent File is looking to see if you're looking to be on the Free Range Texan Podcast. Calling all talent, all kinds of music, country and western that never gets old. Folk music, rock and roll, cowboy poetry, or maybe you just tell a good story. Talent is talent. Maybe your talent will make the cut on the Free Range Talent File. If you've got talent, or if someone you know has talent, submit their name and telephone number to info@freerangetexan.net. They'll probably get a call to talk about podcast stuff, and you could be our next guest on the Free Range Texan Talent File. Go ahead, send it in. 18PR Studios has plenty of tour bus parking. It's a telephone interview, and we'll probably end up playing one of your recordings. You can do this. Okay, turn the effects back on. Email submissions to info@freerangetexan.net. Your friends, relatives, girlfriends, family, boyfriends, or all of the above could be listening to you as our next guest on the Free Range Talent File, providing a home for talent. The Free Range Texan Podcast.
Hi, I'm Michael Shawn, and I had the privilege of growing up in West Texas, either on or near the border with Mexico. If you grew up like that, you knew that there was a certain type of wisdom right across the river that you always needed to be aware of. I remember a story that took place down on the Rio Grande. A couple of American Northerners came down on the river to buy sheep. They brought their money with them, as most folks did in those days. This was before the time of railroads. The man at the bank they deposited their money with had lived among these Mexicans for more than 20 years. These sheep buyers asked their newly acquainted banker to get them a man who spoke Spanish and knew the country. The banker got just that man, a man he could trust, a native, and they set out to be gone over a month. They bought a herd of sheep, and it was necessary to pay for them at the point some 40 miles further down the river. Now, it was not unusual in those days for there to be bandits along the river, and our two Americanos felt uneasy about carrying money to this place to pay for the sheep. The banker came to the rescue by advising them to send the money by the Mexican. He could take it through in a single night. No one would ever suspect him. He assured him that the caballero was perfectly trustworthy. So all was made ready to start the errand at nightfall. He carried the money for over 40 miles that night and delivered it safely the next morning, all of which aroused the admiration of these sheepmen. After that, they were gone for a few months, sold their flocks, and came back to buy more. The second time, they decided not to take the precaution to have the banker hire the man. Feeling that they already knew the Mexican, they did so themselves. They gave him the large sum of money, told him that he was going to the same ranch that he had gone to before. But the first night, when the Americanos camped out, the Mexican murdered them both in their sleep. Taking the money, he crossed into Mexico. It was months before the Americans were missed, and a year before their bones were found. And that Mexican had plenty of time to go to the ends of the earth before his crime would be discovered. So, partners, here's the wisdom of our tale. That Mexican would have never thought of betraying the banker, his old friend, his muy bueno amigo. There were obligations that he would not think of breaking with the banker. But those fool sheepmen, supposing it was simple honesty that caused him to deliver his cash on time, paid the penalty of their ignorance with their lives. And that, my friends, is one of the earliest lessons taught about the art of the deal. I'm Michael Shawn. I'll see you next time at the campfire. Adios, my friends.
This episode of Free Range Texan Podcast is brought to you by A-Team PR. Thinking about creating your own podcast? Let the crew at A-Team PR help. A-Team PR is a proud sponsor and producer of the Free Range Texan Podcast. For more information, go to freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net.
I cannot tell you folks how much I enjoy doing the Free Range Texan podcast. Thanks for joining us. You know, in a couple of weeks we do this again. And thanks again for our numbers increasing, not just in the United States, but in other countries around the world. Now, you gotta figure that we broke one of Michael Shawn's rules on this show. We took off at the beginning of the show, not knowing exactly when and where we were going to land. But yet, here we are. Thanks to the farmers and ranchers and all their advice and wisdom and the folks around Turkey, Texas, it was good to talk with y'all about the home team here. Speaking of farmers, it was the farmers that tell us your fences need to be horse high, pig tight, and bull strong. The same guys also said keep skunks and bankers at a distance. More wisdom in a couple of weeks on our next Free Range Texan podcast. Be sure and join us, won't you? Take us home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael Shawn and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Tower, this is Free Range Texan Airways, Podcast 1, ready for takeoff.
Podcast 1, you're cleared for takeoff.
Nose up. Check wheels up.
Wheels up.
Reduce flaps. Mr. Sanders, take us to 10,000 feet. Bring us around to a course of south by southwest.
10,000 feet, south by southwest. Aye, Captain.
Engage autopilot.